Hello, everyone, dear authors and invited guests. Welcome to the technical session 3B. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the 5th International Conference on Information and Communication Technology for Intelligent System through Zoom on behalf of ICTIS 2021 and Global Knowledge Research Foundation. We are thankful to everyone present on this platform to go along with us digitally for the conference in these unpredictable circumstances of COVID-19 and making this conference more productive. Also, we wish everyone and their families a protected time, and we all will together pass this soon. We hope you will enjoy 2 days of the knowledge and interactive sessions. So just before we get started, I would like to introduce you all to the chair of this session, Dr. Priyanka Sharma. She is a professor in IT department and director in research and development at Rashtriya Raksha University. She is having more than 21 years of experience in teaching, admin, and research at PG level. Her research guidance includes MTech, MSc, MPhil internship projects. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for chairing the session. And now I would like to start with papers.
Thanks.
Yes, ma'am. Now I would like to start with the papers. There is a special note for presenters. You will be given 8 minutes for the presentation. 2 minutes will be for Q&A. On 7 minutes, we will raise a soft reminder. On the 8-minute, your presentation time will be over. And also, I request while the presentation is going on, kindly, rest of the participants, kindly be muted. Okay, so our first presenter is Ms. Lakshmi B. Her paper is about a concerned study on IoT-based healthcare. Hello, Ms. Lakshmi. You there?
Hi, ma'am. Is it audible?
Yes, audible.
Shall I share my PPT?
Yes, sure, you can.
Ma'am, is my PPT visible?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So, good evening to all of you. Before starting my presentation, let me introduce myself. I'm Lakshmi MP and I'm doing my MTech in Computer Science and Engineering in Sahadya College of Engineering and Technology in Kerala. The paper I'm going to discuss with you is a review paper on the applications of IoT in healthcare sector. The title of my review paper is A Concise Study on the IoT-based healthcare. The co-authors are Rehna Baby Joseph, Dr. Shalini Suresh, Sunita V, and Dr. R. Sundar. Next, moving on to the abstract. IoT, this Internet of Things, simply refers to taking and connecting all the surrounding devices or things to the Internet. It is one of the most hopeful future technologies with a wide range of applications. The implementations of IoT in healthcare sector plays a significant role in handling various chronic diseases and also in the prevention and control of diseases. These health tracking devices extend from monitoring health parameters to advanced wearable devices that upgrade the quality of human life. This paper gives a glance at various applications of the IoT that serves in healthcare system for providing a better quality of life. So on the introduction section, Internet of Things, we know that IoT is a concept that connects all devices to the Internet and let them communicate with each other over the Internet. It is a giant network of connected devices, all of which gather and share data about how they are used and the environments in which they are operated. Next, we know that the traditional healthcare fails in many cases due to the terrible increase in population. Hence come the smart healthcare as a solution for it. Smart healthcare refers to the technology that helps in upgrading the quality of life. The central idea of smart healthcare is real-time communication and patient monitoring. So it is essential to have IoT-enabled health monitoring systems for this purpose, which also generates alerts to healthcare service providers in case of any emergency. Connected healthcare refers to a remote healthcare solution with continuous monitoring and emergency notifications. Now we can see what are the technologies used in IoT-based healthcare. There are numerous technologies available for IoT-based healthcare solutions. Some of the core technologies that are listed that are wireless technologies, wearable technology and medical sensors, and body sensor network. Wireless technologies are like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, GPS, wireless LAN, near field communication, that is NFC, etc. Wearable technology and medical sensors means wearables are smart devices with their supporting environment as either the human body or a piece of clothing. This figure shows some of the wearables that are available in the society now. Then body sensor network is a wireless sensor network that is used for examining the human body. Now, the next concept is edge fog cloud network computing. This is the architecture that consists of edge computing, fog computing, and cloud computing. Edge computing is a computing framework that exists at the edges of a network or data sources, whereas fog computing is a computing structure that allows the data and applications to be located anywhere between the data source and the cloud. So next is the cloud computing concept. It utilizes remote server networks provided on the internet for storing, managing, and processing of data instead of local server. Next, we can see there are many medical applications of IoT. Here, some of the medical applications that I have selected in my review paper that are blood pressure monitoring, pain monitoring, ECG monitoring, sleep monitoring, heart rate variability monitoring, nutrition monitoring, pathology monitoring, and cardiac auscultation monitoring. Now we can see some of the related works and the medical applications. First, the blood pressure monitoring. Hypertension, also known as high blood pressure, is a global health issue which is caused due to elevated BP in the arteries. It is a worldwide health problem that requires continuous monitoring. In 2020, a feasible solution for continuous cuffless blood pressure measurement and the calibration that has broad application prospects in the fields of athlete, scientific training, and medical care was developed. Next is pain monitoring. Facial expressions are a behavioral sign of pain. Since the experience of pain causes changes in facial expressions, they can be used as an automatic tool for human pain assessment. So in 2020, an automated acute non-suspective pain recognition system was proposed to objectively measure this pain using physiological signals and a hybrid deep learning network. Another new post-operative pain assessment model based on pulse contour analysis was developed in 2019. Its effectiveness in post-operative pain assessment was also evaluated. Next is ECG monitoring. This electrocardiogram or ECG is a test that measures the electrical activity of our heart that shows whether it is working normally or not. Sensors attached to the skin are used to detect the electrical signals produced when each time our heart beats. These electrical signals are used to monitor the patient's health state by the doctors. In 2018, an ultra low power wrist worn wearable was proposed for examining the user's heart rate via ECG. It uses some extracted heart rate readings and noticeable morphological components of the ECG waveform. Another system based on IoT embedded platform was proposed in 2020, in which the features from ECG signals of patients are taken out using a modified version of discrete wavelet transform that is implemented using fast Fourier transform. Next is the sleep monitoring. Sleep is a natural and periodic state of rest of both mind and body. Any disturbance of the normal sleep pattern is often referred to as sleep disorders. There are many types of sleep disorders like insomnia, sleep apnea, obstructive sleep apnea, etc. A wearable in-ear electroencephalography, that is ear EEG for overnight sleep monitoring as a 24/7 continuous and unobstructed technology for sleep quality assessment was proposed in 2020. Next, heart rate variability monitoring. This heart rate variability deals with the difference in time gap between
Sorry to
heartbeats.
interrupt you, ma'am, but 1 last minute left for your presentation.
Okay. Heart rate variability deals with the difference in time gap between heartbeats. It can be used for diagnosing many intricate cardiac diseases. An automated remote cloud-based heart rate variability monitoring system was proposed in 2018 that used web applications for collecting data and sending alerts to the doctors. Next is nutrition monitoring. Nutrition is a science that deals with the proper intake of food required for a better health in all the living organisms. A proper balanced diet is very important since the nutrition deficiency leads to serious health issues both in children and adults. An automated nutrition monitoring system named SmartLog was proposed in 2018. It was a consumer electronic system that consists of a Wi-Fi enabled sensors and a smartphone application for diet monitoring. Next is pathology monitoring. Pathology is the study of the causes and consequences of disease or injury. It acts as a bridge between science and medicine. One application was developed in this 2019. These are the details. And the last application is the cardiac auscultation monitoring. The heart sounds are the noises that are generated when heart beats and resultant blood flows through it. It delivers physiological and pathological evidence about health. A wireless cardiac auscultation monitoring system was proposed in 2018 for continuous cardiac monitoring and analysis of people with any need of manual healthcare services. As a conclusion, it is transparent that the future of IoT is enormous and surely it will reach a stage where people will not be able to imagine a life without IoT devices. IoT plays a vital role in healthcare. This paper focuses on the various ways that the IoT devices can be used to improve the health of the people. Certain examples of such devices were discussed in the here that helps every individual in maintaining their physical wellness. This discussion is intended to impart a basis for everyone who is working in the field of IoT and for further advancement of various healthcare technologies. These are the references that I have used for doing my related works. Thank you for hearing my presentation. Any queries or suggestions?
So you are MTech student, right?
Yeah.
More depth could have been there in your paper.
Okay, ma'am.
It looks like na scattered type of thing that IoT is used for these things, right?
Yes, ma'am.
But your presentation style was haphazard. So if you want to do something research or in something forward, if you want to carry out this thing, you have to be very particular. You could have included some latest examples of IoT in this situation and all those things. Audience are there, and if they want to ask something, they can ask. Are there? How many people are there? Let's see participants.
There are total 14 participants.
So if they want to ask something, Neelam madam, just tell them.
I guess like anybody have question?
Then we can move to next one, right?
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Thank you so much, Lakshmi. Our next presenter is Ms. Poonam Mangwani, and her paper is about behavioral analysis of multi-tenant SaaS applications. Hello, Ms. Poonam.
Hello, ma'am. Good evening, one and all. Yeah. Thank you. Is my screen visible?
Yes, it is visible.
Yeah. Myself, Mrs. Poonam Mangwani from DAVV Indore. And my co-author is Dr. Mrs. Vrinda Tokekar from the same university, Indore. My title is Behavioral Analysis of Multi-Tenant SaaS Applications. Cloud computing has flourished in computing world where customers subscribe to the service and pay according to the usage through the internet. Three commonly used cloud models are infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. One of the stepping stone of cloud environment is sharing of the resources. Sharing of the resources at different level provides benefits with minimum cost to the organizations. A well-known model of cloud is software as a service with multi-tenancy. A multi-tenant SaaS application usually provides a solution for common organizational needs where tenants share the hardware and the software resources by using one shared application and database instance. Basically, multi-tenancy is nothing but the sharing of an application by multiple tenants. Actually, it demonstrates one-to-many relationship between an application and the tenants. Basically, a tenant is nothing but the group of users which are sharing a common view of an application as if they are the sole users of an application. If we look at multi-tenancy, it provides various advantages. It provides centralized version control, reduced software development time, low maintenance cost, and many more. There is more demand for developing the multi-tenant SaaS applications as it reduces the total cost of ownership.
Sorry to interrupt you, but you can make it full screen slide.
Just a minute.
क्या करना है?
At the bottom, you can see. Yes, perfect.
A tenant is the group of users, as I said. There's more demand for developing the multi-tenant SaaS applications. As we look at the diagram, this is a diagram of a multi-tenant SaaS spectrum where it shows the variants of the multi-tenancy. The two extremes of the multi-tenancy are at the complete isolation, I have called it as tenant specific, and completely shared, I have represented as a tenant shared model. That this isolation, the left extreme is the tenant specific model where tenant has a specific application instance, database instance, and infrastructure. If we go towards the right, slowly, the sharing increases, and at the right hand side, at the right extreme, I have everything as a shared where multiple tenants are represented here, and all the tenants are sharing the application, a common database, and an infrastructure. That means multi-tenancy is nothing but a shared model. The purpose of our research is basically the multi-tenant model is commonly used in applications where tenants' data are closely related, where they can share the information, and they are willing to surrender the data isolation in exchange for the lower cost. The selection of the multi-tenancy model also depends on the need of an organization. In this paper, we have proposed a multi-tenant, multi-service software as a service model that is for designing it is basically a cloud-based application which will provide the configurable services to different tenants. And then we have empirically evaluated the performance of both the extremes, that is the tenant specific as well as the tenant shared model, using the real life example. For this, what we have done, we have developed a multi-tenant, multi-service booking application, and where we have provided 4 types of services: travel, stay, and local conveyance. And then we have evaluated the performance in terms of response time and throughput using the JMeter tool. This is my proposed model. In this model, we have developed the multi-tenant software as a service application where it is providing different services. In our case, our application is providing the 4 services, and these services can be configured by the tenants. And as we see the diagram, in this tenant 1 has configured 2 services, tenant 2 has configured 4 services, and so on. And these are the end users which can subscribe the tenant and accordingly perform the transactions. This is an example, the instance of my proposed model where I have shown my application with 4 services. I have selected 4 services. My application is providing 4 types of services: flight booking, hotel booking, train booking, and taxi booking. And I have number of tenants where tenants can configure their services. Like here, tenant A has configured for flight and hotel booking like this way. And we have end users who will be subscribing the particular tenant service, and then they will be accessing the services. This is my literature review. The methodology which I have used is actually we have designed, our research employs the design and development of an online utility booking application using multi-tenant, multi-service or architecture to perform the behavioral analysis in terms of performance. So for this, we have tenants, we have, as I said, tenants can configure their services and users will register and check the availability and perform online booking operations. And I have developed this application using Python Flask framework and deployed on Google Cloud, Google App Engine platform. The objective of a research is to do the performance analysis. For this, we have two scenarios: tenant specific model and tenant shared model. As I said, two extremities of my multi-tenancy. For this, I have performed the testing. In testing, what I have done, I have performed several experiments on both the scenarios, and where I have varied the number of tenants and the users. Coming to single tenant, where I have a single tenant application, and I have increased my users from, first I tested with 200, then 400, and up to 1000. And then after taking as a single tenant, later on I increased my tenants to 4, 8, and 12 tenants with those above mentioned concurrent number of users. And then what I have done, I have run the test for 20 minutes at different times, and then I have collected the data through Apache JMeter tool, and which displays the various performance metrics. In this case, tenant and user load is also managed using Poisson random timer, which is inbuilt feature in JMeter tool, which generates a random delays between the tenants and the users which will be accessing the application, and which it is based on the Poisson distribution function. The application response time is based on the number of concurrent tenants and users accessing the application. The concurrent workload of several tenants and users are simulated by creating the threads and thread groups in the JMeter tool. And the average response time is the time taken by the concurrent booking transactions. And also we have calculated the throughput, which represents the load on the server. These are my research findings. The average response time of, as we see, the response time of single tenant is gradually increasing with increasing number of users. But if we look at the multi-tenant application, where everything is shared, the average response time with the increasing number of tenants and users is almost same. And the throughput also increases as the number of users increases. However, it does not change with the increase in the tenant size. So finally, I conclude where we know that performance is the most important concern in case of multi-tenant applications, where we know that everything is shared among the tenants. In that case, performance plays a major role. The results show that response time with single tenant is, though the response time with single tenant is better than the multi-tenant architecture, but however, with the increasing number of tenants and the users, there is a small increase in the response time in case of multi-tenancy. But we know that also maximum throughput is achieved with single tenant and multi-tenant. A small decrease in throughput is observed as we increase the number of tenants. Though SaaS, multi-tenant SaaS has various advantages, it is resource efficient, it does not provide these at the cost of performance degradation. These are the references which I have referred. I think I had missed something.
Fine, okay, very nice paper. And I was supposed to ask what are the limitations of your model, but at the end you yourself have mentioned performance, its machine capacity, right? It begins from the from the mind of the computer, it is CPU too. So it is really something very nice you have developed, you have tested, and it is been implemented and deployed also somewhere.
Yes,
I
had deployed. Actually, it is not in use. I had deployed on Google App Engine for the short period of time because I had very few credits to use, because I had a 90 days period. So during that time, it was available on the cloud.
Because it needs alpha testing, beta testing, gamma testing, then it can be really a good product, right? But verification and validation is required. Anybody from participant, if you're having any queries, but the paper was really very nice, very genuine.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? If no, then we can move to next presentation.
Okay, so we are moving to the next presentation, ma'am.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
Thank
so much, Ms. Poonam. Our next presenter is Ms. Dipali Dilip Avasekar. Her paper is about hackathon methodology of for e-governance. Can we get the problem solvers and the solution seekers on one common platform?
A very good afternoon to all. Am I audible?
Yes, totally.
So shall I continue with the presentation by sharing my presentation?
Yes, sure.
A very good afternoon to all. I'm Dipali Avsekar. I'm an assistant professor at Walton Institute of Technology. And I would like to first say that today I'm having a bad tooth. So there will be a bit problem in my pronunciation. So I would first just wanted to inform the session say. So I now begin with my presentation. The paid title of my presentation is Hackathon Methodology for E-Governance. And it says that can we get the problem solvers and solution seekers on one common platform? So the outline of my presentation is like e-governance. First, I'll be talking about e-governance, then SIH for e-governance, then origin of hackathon and usefulness to engineering education. I'll give a brief overview of the Smart India Hackathon 2020 and the research questions of the study, and followed by the case study that we have done for implementing the e-governance. So we all know that today e-governance has become the priority of all the government. And with this COVID scenario, everything, entire world has gone online. So e-governance also is among the 9 pillars of Digital India program. So on the similar lines, the ministry, the HRD, the AICT, and the UGC are taking multiple initiatives to work towards our vision for Digital India to promote creativity and thinking. And this creativity and thinking in the students. So how did they come up into the students is one way they thought of is Smart India Hackathon. So Smart India Hackathon was one such initiative through which the AICT together with Persistent thought of bringing the problem solvers and the proposers onto a one platform. And in this paper, I have tried to analyze is really that students can contribute to the e-governance solution. So SIH for e-governance, like what is then SIH? SIH is Smart India Hackathon. It is a nationwide initiative which has been started by the present government to provide students with a platform to solve some of the vital and urgent problems faced by our country. It also aims to recognize the disruptive technology and digital innovations. It also aims to inculcate a culture of product innovation and a mindset of problem solving. So basically, the whole purpose is they want to see that can we have the problem solvers and the solution seekers on one common platform through HIS. And in this study, okay, so it not only like what is the benefit of it? It's an opportunity that will not only help create good innovative products, but would also give immense technical experience to the students, making them far more competent and market ready. Because what who are the people here who are proposing the problems are the ministries from all over India, the NGOs, the private companies. So, what is the direct outcome of the study? The direct outcome of the study was the students' participation in Smart India Hackathon 2020 amid this COVID. Okay, so this was the first Smart India Hackathon 2020. It was the first ever hackathon which was completely virtual. It was planned to take place in a real time physical scenario, but due to COVID pandemic it went entirely online. So SIH is basically a non-stop 36 hours non-stop product development competition wherein each participant team comprises 6 students and 2 mentors. Okay, the problem statement and the proposers are by the government ministries and the departments, the public sector undertakings, and the non-government organizations. Okay, and the innovators here are the bright minds across the nation from different engineering colleges, AICT approved institutions who come up with a solution to the problem statement. So, what are the students expected to do here? The students are expected to submit their idea and the solution document. So, in this paper, there are four research questions that I have addressed. So, how successful was the first research question was how successful was the participating team in proposing an e-governance solution work on a live project and in on turn contributing to nation building. So, did the second research question was did participation in Smart India Hackathon 2020 instill a mindset of problem solving, a culture of product innovation among the team members? The third research question was did the participating team gains hands-on experience by creating e-governance prototype for providing solution? Okay, so how usable was the Trackit IT as perceived by the evaluators and industry expert? So basically over here, what we tried to do is as I'm a faculty of engineering institute, one of the most reputed institutes from Maharashtra. So what we tried to do is we had 15 teams and 15 teams who had participated. Like we had registered for 15 teams, and out of those 15 teams, the team that got selected, I was a mentor for it. Okay, and we proposed the prototype. So we did a solution. We did a solution building on the prototype or the problem that was faced by the government of Sikkim. And what was the government of Sikkim facing problem was it was having the department was not completely manual. Okay, so they had given a problem which expected that there has to be an automated file tracking system into their office. So our team basically whom I was the mentor with, we proposed a system. Okay, and that system we designed the document, we proposed our model into it, and out of the 21 teams that were selected, our team was one of the top finalists. So what was our idea or approach? Our approach was user friendly web application for tracking the file, and that has been developed considering multiple departments and multiple offices. So we provided a separate dashboard for applicant, public desk, employee, and here the workflow, the system that we use actually was the QR code scanner. So this is the case study, that is the product prototype that we developed for e-governance, and we labeled it as, that is abbreviated it as Track It IT. And so what is Track It IT for e-governance? It is developed for the Rural Development Department of Government of Sikkim to overcome the problem they faced with the conventional HR management. So conventional HR management was basically with the it was manual, completely manual. You take a file, you place it and then locate it. So it was very difficult for them. So one of the major drawbacks with this was the traditional system was to keep the records of individual file. There was no track record maintained properly, and there it was non-automated. So what we did is we developed and proposed a model which was appreciated and selected for the finale of Smart India Hackathon. So we were among the four teams that participated for this product competition. So Trackit is actually using a
Sorry to
QR code.
interrupt you, ma'am, but one last minute left for your presentation.
Yeah. So a quick response system it was used to do the system. Okay, and it was a QR code based system. So I'll just quickly take you through the system. So this is the basically the workflow of the system, and to me instead of technology, what my paper tries to address is, yes, that by this hackathon I tried to find out that the students were really in a position to do a learning for a real time project. So the first research question, like out of the 21 ideas submitted, we were among the four teams. So obviously this this hackathon did allow the problem solvers and the proposers on to come together. Okay, so it helped the student inculcate a culture of product innovation and they made them think and work on a real time project. Also, what were the learning experience, like they could work on this QR generation, QR for mobile app, and how was the usability perceived. So the evaluators found it very very well usable. Only what was lagging, with the team who won the competition was they was having AI, wherein our prototype was not having AI. Actually, when we studied, AI was not required over here, but as it was a cutting edge technology, the we accepted the judgments, and we then came up with, we are currently still working on this particular aspect. So in the conclusion, I would just say that yes, this experiential learning of SIH has proven to be effective in bringing innovative, cost effective, time efficient, and potential sustainable solution to e-governance than traditional product development. So I urge that every engineering institutes and graduates should participate proactively in hackathon to gain a real-time product design experience. Thank you. If you have any questions.
Questions so participants will ask, but observation, very nice, very good paper or idea. Hackathon, smart hackathon. But my question is, or my confusion was, have you used this one in real scenario?
Yes, in real scenario means, ma'am?
Means whatever you are saying in this model, this is an idea. So have you used for
Yes,
some
yes.
real files and this code
Yes,
system?
yes, yes.
Uh,
We have used it. We have
there,
tried it in, yeah, at a
then there will be
Solapur.
many practical problems, है ना? If I'm not
Yes,
wrong.
yes, 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 yes. There were many practical problems, and we are overcoming it. And the most important thing, when we
Uh,
participated in this virtual hackathon, all the teams were at different locations. All the students
huh,
were in
uh,
different states. So through that also, like even now, they are at different locations. So at remote locations, we are currently also working on this. And yes, it is really very problematic. Like
because it will require a different type of environment to develop
yes, yes,
also and to implement also, because
yes,
na
yes, yes,
giving a new idea is very nice. This, like, say for example, controlling traffic and these all things were there in our Ahmedabad city also, but then it looks nice for 1 month 2 months, but anything new coming, so what I feel, the idea is good, but you need to just rework on it. Okay, how people with
yeah, yeah,
resistance won't come in accepting these all new things. Right
yes,
now.
yes, yes, yes,
Rest,
ma'am,
it's
very well.
very good, you are really trying hard, and but you could have elaborated on tools and technologies also which you are using.
I have mentioned, but due to time limit, I was not
No,
able to
it's
go through.
okay. So that what happens now, sometimes it is there is possibility some other tool is available which can be better than this one. You
Yes,
getting my
yes,
point?
yes, ma'am.
So yes, from audience side, if any queries or questions are there, otherwise really happy to hear from these things from you, and we'll move to next presenter, right, Neha?
Yes, yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, Ms. Dipali. And now our next presentation is from Ms. Shirley Maria. Her presentation is about a review of algorithms for mental stress analysis using EEG signal.
Can I start, ma'am?
Yes, you can.
Thank you so much. I'm sharing my screen. 1 second.
I just had one question before I hope I can ask.
Yes, you can.
Ma'am, can we get the recorded sessions of our video? It's to the organizers.
Yeah, let me confirm with my authorities, then later on we will let you know.
Okay, means the sessions are being recorded, right?
Yes, yes, it is recorded.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you, ma'am. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much.
So good evening, everybody. My name is Shirley Maria. I am going to be presenting my paper that I had submitted. It's basically a review of algorithms for mental stress analysis using EEG signal. But before I begin, a little introduction about myself. My name is Shirley Maria, and I am a PhD scholar. I've just started out in Christ. It's been 1.5 years in Christ University. And my research supervisor is Dr. Chandra, and I have co-supervisors as well, Dr. Boni Banerjee, who's in Memphis University, USA, and Dr. Madhavi, who is teaching in the Neurocognitive Science Department of Christ University. So I will begin now. The main aim of this topic and the reason we chose this is because we already see that, right now, even with the COVID cases and everything that's going on, there's a lot of stress in human minds in general. We have been taking on a lot of stress. Everything has become very corporate oriented, and people in general are way more stressful than usual because of the kind of work environment that we are in, home environment that we are in, and the past 2-3 years, because of COVID-19 as well, it's become way more stressful than usual. So that was the inspiration to understand stress, to make sure that the signals are located well in advance, so that we can analyze what is the situation that the person is. And I will explain why it is the need of the hour right now as well. But before we begin, I'll explain what are the brain signals consisting of. The brain signals are mainly, or the EEG signals, whatever we pick up. The EEG is basically a device used to pick up the brain signals. It's placed on the forehead and it has electrodes that helps us pick up the signals, and it is very accurate. And it has a lot of complications with its accuracy, like noise and everything, which we will get to. But the main thing is that it's most accurate and it's very non-invasive. So that is the reason most people use this for stress analysis. They have 5 different waves, and the way you analyze stress is to understand the difference between each length. So you understand the difference between the crests and the troughs of each length, as you can see the waves, and that is how we analyze. Okay, let's say gamma is usually known as peak performance, or right now my brain is activating gamma waves. But if I was sleeping, or if I was in the state of relaxing and stuff like that, it would be the delta waves that are activated, or the theta waves. So if I were suddenly to go from alpha to gamma, it's considered to be very bad. It's considered as a spike in the brain signals, which is not good. So these kind of signals basically help us analyze the stress signal. Typically when we have normal signals, as we can see in the screen, and there's sudden spikes, that is what shows us. Now the analysis of this, and the reason why it is important to know why stress is so bad, is because there are mainly 3 stages of stress. One is the alarm stage, then the next one is the resistance stage, and the stage of exhaustion. These 3 stages are the stages of stress. The first one is a basic understanding of how the cortisol levels are increased, and it's just the basic stress. Like for example, if there's an exam stress that's going on or something like that, there's a body that's reacting to it. It's very normal to have these kind of stress. It stays for a short time and then it goes away. But the second thing is that the stage of resistance. The stage of resistance is nothing but the second stage, when we basically are very much stressed and we don't know that, and then it stays so badly in the background that we basically almost get used to it. I'm sorry, just give me 1 minute. Yeah, sorry about that. So after this, we know that there's a DIA, there's a cortisol level and everything that is happening. And there are some internet issues here, so I'm sorry about that. The DIA, the cortisol level, everything that is increasing, and this is a stage that remains in the background. Okay, and this could cause sleep issues. It could cause issues that are affecting our work and everything like that. And this is the stage where, like the alarm resistance stage, where we should be more aware of these kind of things. And the third one is the stage of exhaustion, which can also lead to death. So stress can get so bad that it leads to death. Now, the reason why we have picked this is because it's a huge process, stress classification, and there's need of the hour for various types of data to be analyzed. And this kind of research is very, very important. A model is necessary to be developed, and that is where the research is progressing. So there are a lot of complications for this process, like there's noise removal, there's pre-processing, etc. That's to be done for this. The noise removal mainly is, getting rid of the bad channels, and these happens because of external and internal reasons. Even the EEG signal is so sensitive that even blinking of the eye can cause a noise, or if in case we are having, the electrode isn't placed properly, that's a noise. So removing the noise is challenging, and then we do downsampling, filtering, etc. For that, most of you here would be aware of these kind of processes. And then pre-processing in general is, after the noise is removed, we perform certain pre-processing things, like we make sure that the kind of data that is going into the analysis is fit for analysis and all of that, and all of the noise and everything is removed, the random neural activity, etc. is removed, and we make sure that if there is any discrepancy, we average it with the rest of the noise and then make up for it. Now, this paper that I had proposed was basically a review of various algorithms, and what we found out with our review is we analyzed almost 40 to 50 papers. There are a lot of algorithms used, and it's not just when it comes to stress alone and in people, but people as in, like I'm talking about students or something like that, but it means stress for various categories like doctors, drivers, engineers, or people who are studying, etc. And from all of these classifiers, we've come up with performance metrics. And basically, we've analyzed the various classifiers used like LDA, artificial neural network, SVM, KNN, etc. And our analysis from all the literature review that we did is what is proposed in this paper, so that the main aim is so that it helps the future researchers to know what to pick. And the two main algorithms that work really well were SVM and hybrid. They were the highest performing algorithms that we've noticed from all of these things. And this was a meta-analysis. It was not an experimental analysis. This was solely based on literature review. And we've noticed that SVM and hybrid are quite similar to each other. The main reason being SVM is very versatile with many sort of data, and hybrid in general is very good because people get to choose. Hybrid analysis is nothing but people get to choose what they want to mix and where, and they choose the best of all the algorithms and then make this. So we found out, and this is a matrices that we've come up with, that hybrid and SVM are the things that are most sorted, and that it does not mean that this is limited to this alone, but most of the researchers could go ahead with this, and this would definitely work for them. So in conclusion, I would like to say that stress is definitely something that's ongoing in the world, especially these days with the 2 years that we've been through with COVID-19. It's just increasing in an alarm stage. So this is a necessity. It's a necessity because a lot of us don't realize, but this has been affecting us mentally. And this is not good. We always neglect mental health. Mental health is quite important for our well-being and efficiency. So it is necessary to automate this process. It's not that the process does not exist, but it's a huge process and it's a very physiological process. But with the help of our algorithms and our understanding of computer science and the automated algorithms, we could combine the drawbacks and then come up with a new algorithm that works for this. So that is the conclusion. And more than SVM, we would prefer going with hybrid model, or we would suggest. That is what the review concludes as well, because the hybrid is slightly 0.5, 0.6% better, but it also gives the researcher the choice to use whatever they want or to pick up whatever they want according to the situation. If it's epilepsy, they can choose their own algorithms together. If it's particularly related to Parkinson's, they can choose their own, but then hybrid it in such a way, using the best of everything. So that was my presentation. Thank you for your time. I'm open to questions right now if there are any.
Before this thing, what you say, machine learning, hybrid and everything, have you studied the basic psychology and philosophy, everything models of stress?
Yes, ma'am. So I did a course on neurobiology, neurocognitive science from the University of California. So basically this was an online course. And
so can you name some theory? Nice theory by which you can.
Yes, ma'am. So there is a very famous theory called GAS. It's the used theory around the world, and it was published in 1980s. And back then,
it is based on questions, images, what?
So that theory is based on the cortisol levels of the body, the hormonal level of the body, the DHEA, the cortisol, and all of those things. So that is the ones that affect the stress, and also the signals in general. If, for example, there is a high difference in the signals and it is recurring through a period of time, then they understand that it's in the alarm stage. And also their physiological behavior, for example, if they're very tired.
Because you are correct, because our university is also doing research in this field. But I think so success rate is not that high. So if you can, because measuring stress at one level, getting my point?
Yes,
in COVID, few people may be happy also if they are quarantined, for example.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
And few people may go mad also. Okay, bhai, what is this? Since last 15, say I was also suffering from this one, and so I'm feeling good today. Okay, I'm chairing this session and I'm interacting with you. So understood now. And in morning I may be stressful, in evening even of oxygen level and all those parameters variations are there. So what I feel that this is a very tough topic, because you're dealing directly with human brain, not only brain but heart and all those emotions, na? So you would be you should be very careful when you declare your result.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
We will be performing an experimental analysis for sure, ma'am. Like you said, it's actually not easy to predict, and the brain is very sensitive. So
and you know, so many previous theories nowadays scientists are saying that these are not, valid. Different associations are there, like fingerprinting. So many, we are having so many machines, and so many questionnaires we have purchased. One, I don't remember the name, but Times also is giving one questionnaire, 50 question. Then images, we are working on prisoners, criminals. So so keep this thing in mind. Okay,
Yes,
rest
ma'am.
was
Thank you.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else from participants? Else we'll go to next one.
Thank you so much, Ms. Shirley.
Thank you.
Our next presentation is from Ms. Reshma A.S. Her paper is about case study on water management through sustainable smart irrigation. Hello, Reshma.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Is it audible, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay, I'll share my screen. Is it visible, ma'am?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Reshma. I'm doing my PhD in Amrita School of Sustainable Development in Amrita Vishwavidyapeetham, Amritapuri. First of all, thank you for this great opportunity.
Ma'am, please make it a full screen slide.
Okay, sure. Okay. So today I'll be presenting a case study on water management through sustainable smart irrigation. These are my team members: Abhinaya, Adarsh, Prashanti, Shivnesh, Vishnudharan, and Radhika. This is my presentation outline. Coming to the introduction, as we all know, water is an abundant natural resource available to all living beings, but still today, we face severe issues due to water scarcity. So statistics reveal that nearly 1 million people across the world still do not have access to water. And in India, the condition is still worse. That is 600 million people do not have access to water. This is according to the report of Niti Aayog. So the variation in climatic conditions have highly affected the water quality and accessibility. So these conditions demands for flexible systems that are highly required to adapt to these circumstances and provide resource management at critical times. Coming to the study area, we conducted our study in Gudipadu Chervu village in Andhra Pradesh in India. So in the village, the population is like 547 people and 173 households. And the major occupation practiced by the people is agriculture, and the major crops grown are chili, paddy, and cotton. Coming to the methods, the multidisciplinary approach like participatory rural appraisal and human-centered design was adapted for our study. So in participatory rural appraisal involved methods like resource mapping, seasonal activities, inflow-outflow diagram, problem tree mapping, brainstorming sessions. And in human-centered design, participate observation, interviews, personas and scenarios were done. So this resource mapping helped us to identify the major resource and layout of the village. The overall activities performed by the people in different seasons were mapped through the seasonal activities. The expenditure of people in the village were tracked through inflow-outflow diagram, and other activities like problem tree mapping, brainstorming session, and participant observation, in-depth interviews, personas and scenarios help us to understand the problems of the people faced by the people in the village, understand the challenges, and understand the pain points. From this analysis, we came to understand that most of the people in the village are dependent on agriculture for their livelihood. And due to the climatic variation in recent years has highly affected their agriculture practices because of the low rainfall, and this seasonal variation had a negative impact on their agriculture practices, and because of that they are forced to change their farming methods due to unavailability of water and low rainfall. So by understanding these problems, our team proposed a solution for the villages, that is the drip irrigation method. So why we choose drip irrigation method was because it is one of the method, that is one type of micro irrigation system that save nutrients and use water efficiently. It directly supplies water drops to the plants at slow rate, and water and nutrients enter the soil from the emitters, which are fed directly into the roots of the plants, and it also retrieve the moisture and nutrients almost instantly, so that plant never get stressed. So from the situation of the condition of the village, we understood that people in the village are completely dependent on agriculture, and the only water source available to them is groundwater and rainwater. And they are using most of the water available to them for the irrigation purpose, and they also face huge water scarcity issues. So based on this, we understood that a sustainable method of irrigation was necessary to overcome the water scarcity issues faced by the people. So the drip irrigation method was proposed by our team. But this study is only at the preliminary stage. We have proposed a solution. As a next step, we have to implement the solution. We have to again work with the villagers. We have to implement it in village, and we have to monitor the actual effectiveness of the solution has not been monitored yet. So as a next step, we will be doing that. The effectiveness of the solution will be monitored and evaluated, have to be evaluated. As a next step, we will be doing that. So this is our case study. These are the reference. Thank you.
Number one title could have been better instead of case study.
Okay, ma'am.
Secondly, Reshma, I think so nothing was new. Say for example, if you are studying the types of irrigation, then which decisions your system will take or how you will make it more smarter, and you're getting my point. Still in-depth study is required, because I have done a lot of work in this thing, irrigation water, its quality, its parameter, pH, this thing, its type, effluent water, so many things you can do. Understood? Say for example, in irrigation, cauliflower requires different type of water, this whatever we are consuming in raw format. So many things you can include to make your study more useful for whom you are trying to develop. If it is research oriented, you need to really work on it. So it will become interesting also and useful.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Reshma. Our next presentation is from Ms. Kanika Persija. Her paper is about a survey of recent advances in recommendation systems. But I guess Ms. Kanika is not available. So we are moving ahead with our, moving ahead with our next presenter, Mr. Ajay Sankar Golapalli. His paper is about early detection of Parkinson's disease through speech features and machine learning review. Hello, Mr. Ajay.
Yeah. Good evening, madam. I hope I am audible to you.
Yes, you're audible.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. I'm just presenting the screen. Just a second. I hope the screen is visible.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I am Ajay Shankar. I am one of the author for the paper that was being published for the international conference that is ICTIS 2021. And the paper title is like early detection of Parkinson's disease through speech features and machine learning. And this paper is a review kind of paper, and most of the authors' contribution was gathered, and I am going to present here. And here, yes. See on the screen, we can have the contents. Here at first, I'm going to give you a briefing regarding the disease, the Parkinson's disease, and later on the generalized system, how the detection will be done, and then various data sets that were available in the as corpuses, and also several clinical databases that were available for us, and then the signal processing methods, what they have used earlier, and also the feature sets which are available, and then the classifiers along with the feature sets, how the detection mechanism shows its accuracy will be presented here. Okay, let me introduce the disease at first. So the most common disease in the elderly people next to the Alzheimer's disease is like Parkinson's disease. So this is one of the kind of dementia diseases. Okay, there are several types of dementia diseases like other than Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's. We are also having Huntington disease. And certain times we are having the dementia diseases like alcoholic based dementia diseases. So here one such kind of disease, a dementia related disease we have considered, that is Parkinson's disease. And this Parkinson's disease is one of a neurological disease in which we are having the loss of dopamine production in the brain cells. And this particular dopamine production will be very much essential for the motor system control, okay, in the central nervous system. And here, whenever we are having a patient with Parkinson's disease, there might be some symptoms like hypokinetic dysarthria, in which we are having the reduction of phonation time. Okay, these are all the speech-based things I am going to give you here, especially for the Parkinson's disease affected patient. And here, the reduction in the phonation and decrease in the breath support. Whenever there was a decrement in the breath support, definitely it will be affecting the speech. And also whenever there is a harsh breath, then also the voice will be affected for the patient. And also we can expect certain acoustic noises while a Parkinson affected patient might be speaking. Okay, the Parkinson's disease might be manifesting mainly in two things. One is like vocal impairment in the, especially in the vocal impairments like dysphonia and also dysarthria, where dysphonia is like the general normal voice sounds may be degraded, and also dysarthria means the pronouncing of the words might be degraded. So these are the major things that will be treated as symptoms for the Parkinson's disease. And here there will be some impairment in the speech, postures, and also locomotions in the Parkinson's disease patient. And the spontaneous speech might be one of the major tool that can be predicting this Parkinson's disease. That means the early stage of the Parkinson's disease might be can be identified here, and which is a non-invasive technique. And while we are speaking about the spontaneous speech, already it was said that it is one of the effective tool for identification of diseases that is like autism, or else Huntington or Parkinson's, and also Alzheimer's disease. Okay, and then so whenever we are dealing with these kind of spontaneous speech-based detections, the machine assistive technologies for these kind of affected people, the development of these machine assistive technologies might be helping the patients. So while we are developing these machine assistive technologies, definitely the speech-based feature extraction and also detections might be very much helpful. And here we can have the generalized disease detection flow. Okay, here that means the most of the authors commonly follow this kind of flow. Okay, in which the step one starts with the voice tasks. Okay, that means the patient that means he might be involved in certain vocal based tasks, like he might be describing certain picture, or he might be describing certain emotional situations what he have faced, or else sometimes it is a general social conversations, and these kind of conversations or else the voice based tasks might be recorded, and the recorded voice tasks might be taken into like especially in the entire voice recordings, there might be only certain the portion of the relevant information we are going to grab, and this portion might be done based on the pre-processing techniques. So in the pre-processing techniques, we generally segregate the voice data and also unvoiced data. Like whenever there are vocal cord vibrations, then it will be recorded. And whenever there is unvoiced data, like no vibrations of the vocal cords, then also it will be recorded, and it will be segregated at first. That means the data, voice data will be segregated from the unvoiced data. That was the first pre-processing we may do. And then the signal might be standardized, and also some kind of randomization, normalization, and the removal of outliers will be carried out in the pre-processing step. And then in the feature extraction, several signal processing methods might be utilized for the feature extraction process. And here in this review, I'm going to give you certain signal processing methods used, and also what are the various types of feature extractions the earlier work has done. And also here in the next step, the classifier selection will be taken. So based on the features we have extracted, in combination with the features extracted, a particular kind of classifier might be selected, and the combination of a best combination of these features extracted and the classifiers might be developing a particular algorithm in which the decision making can be done. Okay, that means the accuracy of the decision making algorithm is also shown here.
Sorry to interrupt you, Ajay, but one last minute for your presentation.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. So here in the presentation, we are having certain databases designed by University of California, and also some National Center of Voice and Speech, Empower. And these are the different types of databases which are available, like corpuses, and also certain clinical based databases were taken, like dataset 1, dataset 2, dataset 3. So in the tabular form, you can observe all these databases that were available, and also the size of the data sets they have taken, and also what were the tasks they have taken while recording the voices. And then we are having the recorded voices will be taking with the signal processing methods like OGABDC, MFCC, GITFA, and then MDVP. These are the certain kinds of signal processing methods which are used for extracting the particular features, speech-based features from the recorded signals. So here the feature sets like vocal features, acoustic features, phonations, articulations, and then linguistics, dysphonia, baseline features. These are the several types of features that can be extracted from the recorded voices. And here, while we are speaking about a particular kind of feature, like let me take an example like phonation features, there might be features like fundamental frequency, and then the perturbations coefficient, and also minimum vocal fundamental frequencies, and relative amplitude perturbations, 5-point amplitude perturbations. These kind of things, we call it as the features that are extracted from the signal. That is the speech signal. And here on the screen, you can observe the different types of features like acoustic, and what were the signal processing methods they have observed that used for the extraction. And while we are using these acoustic features, the accuracies that can be achieved like 89.46, sometimes it is up to 94% of accuracy is also observed. And the type of database they have considered for the feature extraction and also accuracy calculation is given in the table. In out of all these features, it was observed that MFCC basal features and phonation basal features achieved 100% of accuracy in disease detection. That means a patient with Alzheimer's, a patient with Parkinson's disease can be 100% accurately identified from a group of people in which healthy controls and also disease affected people were there. And here you can observe the classifiers. Several classifiers were available. like logistic regression, support vector machines, and SVM with Gaussian and also tenfold cross validations, and k-nearest neighbor, random forest. These are the different types of classifiers that were used earlier, and also the databases on which the classifiers were applied is observed. And here also we can observe that 100% of efficiency can be achieved by using MLP based LSVM classifier, and also random forest classifier is also helping us for 100% of accuracy. And then MLP, that is the multi-layer perceptron, is also achieving 100% of accuracy in detection of the disease. Right. So while coming to the conclusion, a best combination of features and also the classifiers were very much essential for us to go for a higher accuracy in detection of disease. Okay. So here I'm concluding my session. Okay, and these are the several references we have taken while extracting all these information. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Good try.
Yes, thank you.
But
yes,
have you implemented this thing? Because taking voice, making it learn, then out of, say, for example, 100 patients are there, for example.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Then out of 100, hypothetically, say two persons may have this type of problem, right? Because it is early detection. So are you sure that these all things will work? Because there are so many reasons also, like brain stroke and all those things.
Yes, ma'am. That was the my actual future work is to identify, like, if suppose a group of people were there, both with Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease or Huntington disease combinedly were there, how accurately we can identify a person that he is only having Parkinson's disease or only he is having Alzheimer's disease. This is the further work we are going to proceed, ma'am.
But in your team, anyone from medical field is there? In your team, anyone from medical field is there?
No, ma'am.
Because you will require frequent proofs and interactions. Because this disease is a typical type of disease. Understood?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So it is not like that BP is a progressive disease or diabetes. It is not like that. You can mine data. You can tell, okay, at age of 40, this person is having this X point. Then every year plus 2 points. This is not like. So we need to be very careful when we are dealing with medical problems. Huh?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, fine. Rest is okay. Participants, if you are having any question. Because taking data sets and proving is an easy task. Everyone now.
Yes, ma'am. Real-time data. But yes, it would be tough for us to go for the real-time data.
To implement, to give right answer to the query. Query means what are the parameters you're getting from human body, and then to claim, giving a result or declaring that this person is suffering or may suffer, something like that. Future prediction.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. Rest was okay. Nice idea. Yes, ma'am.
We have, thank you, Mr. Ajay. And now we have one of our presenter. Okay, back. She is Miss Kanika Persija.
Who was not there at that time,
survey of recent.
Actually, ma'am, sorry, ma'am. Are you able to listen my voice?
Yes.
Yes, Kanika.
Sorry, ma'am. Sorry for the delay. Actually, ma'am, I was in the wrong session. I was in the technical session. Then my time came. Then the host told me that I'm in the wrong session.
No problem. No, now you are in right virtual session 3B. Welcome. And I suppose you are the last presenter of today's session.
Yeah, ma'am.
Yeah, please. No need of
from my side, ma'am.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, good evening, ma'am.
Go ahead, Kanika.
Yeah, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. Ma'am, are you able to?
Yes.
Yes. So let's start. My presentation is on a survey of recent advances in recommendation system. Firstly, abstract. present recommendation system, such as the content grounded filtering and collaborative filtering. Basically, two approaches are there, content grounded and collaborative. They practice dissimilar database to create references. Content based filtering creates recommendation built on customer favorite. In content based, only one user is there. He searches anything on the recommendation system, and he finds recommendation based on his query. And in the collaborative filtering, group of recommenders are there. They discuss based on the favorites, user favorite, their feedback, and then recommendation is given to the user. It forecasts customers favorite as a linear weighted group of other user preferences. Both approaches have limit. Content based can recommend a new item, but it requires very large amount of data that cause the problem of big data analysis. Like collaborative wants huge database with lively customers. So my work is based on the hybrid approach that will conclude the content filtering as well as the collaborative filtering. Let's see how. Firstly, what is the recommender schemes? As we know, the digital records are there, large count of people are there who search various amount of data on internet, and various recommendation systems are there. So we have to acquire a lot of knowledge in a well time. So a recommender system creates recommendation and reference to help their customer in various supervised practices. Basically, you can see the recommendation system is of two types, content based and collaborative. Content based, just like on a single query, um, you can get the recommendation, and collaborative, you can use the past behavior as well. They can be of two approaches, model based and memory based. Basically, I will use the deep learning model. Deep learning model, what is now it comes, the question comes to our mind, what is the deep learning? Deep learning is the basically class of machine learning. It is a subfield of artificial intelligence. You can say neural network with the deep layers. There are a lot of neural network, just like the artificial neural network, convolutional neural network, Bayesian network, but I will use a neural network with the deep layer in which the uh, information, or you can say parameters, is given to the neural network, and there are a lot of hidden layers, and obviously, as we know, the output is already fixed, and on the basis of that, recommendation is given to the user. Deep learning can be generally deliberated as a subfield of artificial intelligence. The central principle of deep learning is to acquire profound explication, just like the knowledge of many stages of depiction as well as the thoughts from the statistics. It uses the hierarchy of non-linear processing layer. Non-linear, just like it is not like the feed forward network. You can go back to the previous layer to find historical. Just like, let's take an example. Suppose I'm a user on Google, I'm searching that to play song of that particular movie. I will I will have a lot of suggestions. After 1 hour, I will again search the same query. Now, from the big data, the query will not be done again. It will use the past behavior, it will use the past record, and will answer my question. Yeah, will recommend me anything instantly, without the time delay, without the complexity, without the not the delay. So what happened here? It uses the past behavior, it uses the past memory, it uses the deep layer learning, in which the data was already historical. मतलब historical data को आप pick आसानी से कर सकते हो. Why deep learning for search and recommendation system? Now the question comes to our mind. I'm saying the deep learning, the neural network with the deep layers. Why I should use the deep learning for the search, or you can say for the recommendation system? As you can see, the direct content feature extraction instead of the metadata. You can extract direct your features. Text, you can have the text, image, audio, better representation of user and item, and you can use the hybrid algorithms, and heterogeneous data can also be used here, better suited to model dynamically behavior pattern and complex feature extraction. Now deep learning based recommendation system, basically I have read a lot of papers in which I've concluded that compared to old style method, just like the factorization method, as we do in the mathematics, factors method, adjacent neighbor centered method, deep learning will offer more precise recommendation, as deep learning procedure provide non-linear illustrations which permit learning unforeseen or unconceivable actions. Just like, let's take an example. Suppose a child is there. I'm learning him counting 1 to 10. After half an hour, I will listen to him that tell me the counting. He will say 1, 2, 3 only, not after that. So here basically my input is given and my output is also fixed. I have to train the neural network so that it can use the fresh data as well as the historical data. Suppose neural network, basically feature extraction is there. Okay, let me explain this point at a later time. Then I will tell you what is health recommendation system. Deep knowledge practices are not specific for a single reference technique. You can employ various type of dissimilar purposes for your recommendation system, and at last they return the further precise references compared to the superficial ones. You can use deep learning approaches for the customer grounded as well as the item grounded. Obviously provide you greater accurateness, greater accuracy. What is health recommendation system? Basically a lot of recommendation systems are there. I will work on the health recommendation system. The health recommendation system is a decision making system which recommends proper healthcare information to both health professionals and patient as an end side. Suppose ma'am, a patient is there, उसे diabetes है, just like उसे BP measure करना है, he will give his vital signs to a device. I can use the fresh data.
Sorry to
or
interrupt you, ma'am. You have 1 minute left.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Examples are food, drug, health status prediction. And so my literature, you can see accuracy of various classifiers. These are the data sets. These are the authors, data sets, and classifiers. And you can see at the last deep learning classifier. On the basis of deep learning classifier, we can have the accuracy of 90%. I will use the hybrid approach in deep learning, which will provide me greater execution time, greater accuracy, less delay. These are some approaches. Basically my work is based on the recent advances. जो last work हुआ है, तो उसमें जो there are the lot of year in which the author they use various approaches and findings are there. A lot of approaches are used, and on the basis of that approaches various findings are there, and at last based on various findings I concluded that I should work on the health recommendation system with the deep neural network using heuristic model that will evaluate the greater accurateness of my recommendations. You can give your recommendation with the IoT devices as well. So I should with the fresh data you can pick up the old data as well. I will take him as the input. The feature extraction will be there. After that, the deep learning recommendation will be given as the output. So in the conclusion, I will say the collaborative filtering is superior to the other content based approach, a deep learning methodology for acquired dissimilar topographies of customer and things routinely to progress accuracy of recommendation system. Collaborative filtering recommendation procedure with deep learning provide good accuracy. This model uses a feature extraction scheme built on a quadratic polynomial regression model, which gets the hidden topographics further precisely by old metrics. Basically, the old metrics techniques were there. Metrics technique to overcome that approaches, I have found approach with the deep learning with the deep layers, in which we don't have to do feature extraction again and again. It uses the past behavior. On basis of the past behavior, it gives us output, it gives us recommendation. So basically हमारी जो big data analysis की problem थी, that will be removed. बार बार हमें मेटा डेटा से हमें डेटा बार बार पिक नहीं करना
Sorry to
पड़ेगा.
interrupt you, ma'am, but you already have exceeded the time.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am, I haven't concluded. These are some of my
Okay, fine.
references.
What are the limitations of deep learning?
Ma'am, limitations of deep learning?
Deep learning, yeah, the concept itself.
Yeah, ma'am, there are a lot of limitations.
You know where first deep learning was used? For which type of recommendation and predictions?
No, ma'am, sorry, I don't know. I will
Okay,
consider
fine,
it
fine.
and I will study it.
So still in depth you study, है ना?
Yeah, ma'am.
That much. Chalo,
Ma'am,
okay,
actually, my research work is started now. I
no
have
problem,
done
no
one-
problem.
Yes.
But while doing research, we should take everyone's stakeholder suggestion.
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you.
And whatever the suggestions are feasible for you, you can just implement, else you can discard. Right?
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, fine. Best wishes.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you for considering me late. Thank you.
No worries.
It's okay. It's okay.
Thank you so much.
So as we are done with our today's session, okay, I sincerely thank our authors for their excellent presentation and contribution in this session, and all our participants for being a part of this international conference. I hope this session was informative enough. And all the presenters would be getting their digital certificates within through email within 2 working days. Further, all the papers have already been forwarded to the Springer. The publication will be live within 5 to 6 months. So kindly cooperate with the team of ICTIS 2021. I also thank our session chair, Dr. Priyanka Sharma, for chairing the session. A token of appreciation to the chair on behalf of team ICTIS 2021 and Global Knowledge Research Foundation. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your valuable presence.
Thank you. Always my pleasure.
Great. So I request you all to on the camera so we can take a quick snapshot of our virtual conference.
I'm still struggling with my post-COVID.
Oh. So I hope you are doing
इस
good,
बार
ma'am.
रहने देते, you take participants, है ना?
Yes, sure, ma'am.
Okay. So kind of for understanding.
Yes, ma'am. And also please take care.
Yes, yeah.
Fine.
So we'll leave the meeting?
Yeah, if you
Okay.
want for Q&A, the room will be open for 1 minute or else whatever you want, ma'am.
I think so. If the things are over, participants are presented, no queries, then we can wind up, right?
Yes, sure.
Okay. Fine.
Okay.
Chalo, bye. Huh? Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.